always loved camping. There's just something about the quiet and the distance from everything and everyone. The stillness of the woods at night that calms me in a way nothing else does. After nearly burning out earlier this year, I knew I needed a break, a real one. So I started looking for a place to go, somewhere remote, peaceful, not flooded with tourists. I made a post on Reddit asking for recommendations, something like, "Anyone know of a quiet, off-the-grid campsites near the Adirondacks?" A few people responded, but one message caught my eye. A user replied with a spot near Stillwater Reservoir and said it was beautiful, remote, and barely known to the public. He even included rough GPS coordinates and said, "You'll love this spot." After looking over the information, it seemed perfect. So I decided I was going to take on this adventure the upcoming weekend. The night before the trip, I carefully packed everything. I took my usual gear, which included my tent, camp stove, cooking supplies, hatchet, flashlight, and first aid kit. I also prepared some food, like a few cans of beans, sausage, cornbread, and a small flask of whiskey. I double-checked everything, made sure my truck was gassed up, and even told a coworker where I'd be just in case. Then I went to bed with that familiar jittery excitement that only comes before a trip into the wild. The next day I woke up, got ready, and headed out. The journey was a 2-hour drive, which wasn't bad as there wasn't much traffic. I then arrived at the site around Friday afternoon. I came out the truck to take in everything, and it was exactly what I'd hoped for, tucked away in a clearing. There wasn't anyone there, which made sense, as it wasn't on any official map. The GPS coordinates I got lined up perfectly. This was perfect, as no one was in sight but the wind rustling the trees and birds chirping like a metronome. I slowly unpacked and began setting up my tent. I started to get hungry, so I made a fire and prepared to make dinner. I had beans and sausage with cornbread. I sat by the flames, sipping whiskey from my metal camping cup while sketching trees in my notebook. The stars that night felt closer than ever before. After a while, it was getting late, so I decided to turn in for the night. The next morning when I woke up, something felt off. My metal cup was sitting beside the fire pit, even though I was sure I had packed it away. I tried to shake it off and told myself I was being forgetful, but it stuck in my mind. Around noon, I went for a 5-mile loop hike while taking photos and picking wild blueberries. I then headed back to camp, but when I got back, the flap of my tent was open. Again, I wasn't sure if it was me or not, but that night, the uneasiness grew. I tried to shrug it off and went to sleep. Then I woke up 2 hours later as I heard footsteps. It wasn't an animal, as these footsteps sounded steady, which told me that it was a human. I sat there quietly in my tent, holding my breath, listening as I heard dry leaves crunching. I just sat there frozen. Then all of a sudden, a twig snapped, but it was very close. I whispered, "Hello?" But only the silent answered. I didn't sleep a second that night. Finally, the sun came up and I made up my mind that I was packing up and heading home. As I disassembled my tent, I heard rustling in the trees. It was definitely human. I grabbed my hatchet and followed the sound cautiously. After 10 minutes of walking, I found something I wasn't prepared for. It was a cabin. It was small, half-collapsed with moss all over it. This was not on any map, and its windows were boarded up and the door hung open, but against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the walls were lined with old newspapers from the 90s. On a table sat rusted tools, a lantern, and a pile of Polaroid pictures. As I took a look at them, I realized it was all campers. Some were smiling while some were asleep, and I noticed something strange. They were all taken from a distance. Then I saw something that had my chest tighten. It was a picture of me sitting by the fire the night before. I felt my throat close up, and I dropped the photo and stumbled back. All of a sudden, behind me, a floorboard creaked. I spun around, but there was no one there. I wasted no time and ran sprinting through the trees, heart pounding and branches cutting my arms. I dropped the hatchet, but didn't stop. I ended up running until I collapsed at a ridge with my legs shaking, too scared to move. I considered calling for help, but there was no service. Then came the sounds. First I heard footsteps, then breathing. Something or someone was moving nearby as it sounded like they were circling the area. I sat there for hours until night came again. I decided that I would stay here for the night. hoping that they would eventually give up and leave. I didn't move until sunrise. When the sky finally lit up, I ran straight to my car, leaving everything behind, and drove straight to the nearest ranger station. I got out my truck and ran straight to the door. When I got there, I told them everything: the noises, the cabin, the photos, and especially the one of me sleeping. The rangers were older, weathered, but they didn't laugh it off, as one of them nodded slowly and said, "You're not the first." We went back to the site and everything was still there, as nothing seemed missing. Then we took a walk to the cabin, and there it was, slumped like it was trying to hide. We went inside, but this time it was different, as there were no Polaroids, but the tools and lantern were still on the table, and they, however, looked freshly wiped down. "I swear," I said. "Everything was here, including the photos. There was one of me that was taken the night before." One of the rangers waved me over, said, "You need to come see this." On a back wall behind peeling wallpaper and vines, we found a board nailed up like a plaque that read, "In memory of Elijah Rowe, lost but not forgotten." The ranger said Elijah had grown up nearby and used to camp here with his father, and it seems the cabin had been here for more than 20 years. "What happened to him?" I asked. He paused and said, "He went missing 6 years ago. He came out alone for a weekend and never returned. They only found his truck. No body, no signs of a struggle. It was like he disappeared." I stared at the plaque and asked, "Then who took the photos?" The younger ranger shifted on his feet and said, "Elijah wasn't the first. We've heard stories of solo campers seeing someone watching them and finding things moved at their campsite. There's a theory that someone's living out here off-grid, but this forest is huge, so we never found this cabin until now." While they continued inspecting the cabin, I sat outside on a mossy log, trying to wrap my head around all this. Then something caught my eye under my feet. I dug it up with a stick until I uncovered a rusted metal box with dozens of Polaroid pictures inside. But these were different people in different eras. Some were yellowed, while some looked recent. The one thing that is common is that all of them were taken from a distance. Some were friends and others were couples. Then some, like me, were completely alone. At the bottom was a final photo of a bearded man. It was dirty with hollow eyes. He was standing behind a tree holding a camera. There was no date, just a name written on the back, E. Rowe. Anyways, the rangers finished up and they escorted me back to my campsite to gather my things. After that, I went straight home. Still shocked from everything, I drove in silence for the 2 hours back. Fast forward, it's now a couple weeks, but ever since those days, I tried to pretend life was normal again. I focused on work and tried not to think about that photo of me sleeping. I boxed up everything, both physically and mentally, and moved on. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. I looked at my phone and noticed that the number was from Forest County. I answered the call. "Hello?" Then the person answered, "Yes, is this Mr. Brooks? This is Detective Holloway from the Sheriff's Department. You filed a report a few weeks ago about the cabin near Stillwater Lake?" I said yes. He stated, "I wanted to give you an update. We had our team check the cabin again just to be thorough. They found an old hand-drawn map under the floorboards. It had water damages, but it also had coordinates scrawled in the margin. It led to a spot 8 miles northwest." I didn't say a word. He went on to say, "We sent a team." Then he paused and his voice dropped. "They found a body. It had been buried in a shallow grave hidden by roots and moss. The remains were decomposed with tattered clothing, a torn backpack, and a rusted camera nearby. We were, however, able to retrieve dental information, and our lab confirmed it was Elijah Rowe." I just sat there in silence, then said, "Thank you for the update," and hung up. I was shocked because I came to the conclusion that the suspect must be Elijah. The evidence at the time made it seem that he went off the grid, but in reality, he was just another victim. It seems someone was trying to use him as a cover. I went back online as I decided I was going to make a post about it to warn other people. That's when I noticed something. It was the user's name that recommended the campsite to me. It was Eli Rowe, 1991. But it wasn't actually Elijah. It was someone else using his name. which confirmed my theory. Someone out there is using this name as a cover-up, and they're still out there. The scariest part is realizing that I escaped a sinister plot,